Welcome to another author event at the Poison Pen Bookstore. I'm John Charles, and tonight the Poison Pen is honored to have with us three talented, multi-selling, best-selling authors, Traci Hunter Abramson, Dani Pettrey, and Sian and Bessey. Did I get that right?
Perfect.
Before we begin, the Poison Pen does have copies of the author's new book, and we would be happy to hold one or more or put them in the mail for you. Just give us a call after the event or go online to the Poison Pen Bookstore. Now I'd like to welcome Dani, Traci, and Sian.
Thank you.
My first question for each of you is, before you became published authors, you had lives. What can you tell us about those lives? And we'll start with you, Sian.
Well, I am the mother of 5 children, and I started writing when my youngest was a baby, and I would write during her nap time. And so before I was a published author, I was running around like most mothers are, doing all of the school things, carpool things, soccer, piano, all of those.
You were born in Wales, weren't you?
I was. I was actually born in Cambridge, England, because my father was going to university there. But both of my parents are Welsh, and so we ended up back in Wales. So I was raised in Wales and lived there until I was 18, and then moved over to the States to go to college, married an American, and here I am.
Traci, what about you? You were born in Arizona, is that right?
I was born here in Phoenix. So yeah, I grew up here in Phoenix. I graduated high school up at Mingus High School. So back then we had West Sedona going with us because Sedona wasn't incorporated yet. So in Cottonwood. And then I went to school in Utah at BYU and then was recruited by the CIA. So I ended up moving to Virginia, which is where my husband is from. So that was convenient. And I've been in Virginia ever since.
And what about you, Dani?
I'm more like Sian. So I was a classics major in college, which doesn't go with a whole lot of jobs with just a bachelor's. So I taught preschool for a number of years, and then I had my own kids, and I homeschooled my kids and started writing when they were kind of mid-elementary school.
What was it like getting your first book published? And we'll start with you, Dani.
It was a dream come true. It was amazing. People always ask why I write mystery or, why I started writing. And my mom gave me Murder on the Orient Express for my 8th birthday. And I read it and I thought, this is amazing. I would love to do this. And I didn't think it would happen because you dream that as a kid, but it doesn't really come true a lot. And so, yes, when I got my first contract, I don't know who was more excited, myself or my mom or my husband, but it was just a lifelong dream come true.
So mine is kind of a 2-part answer. So my very first book was actually a cookbook that we ended up having to self-publish with my mom, who, for those of you who live in the Valley, it's the Home Hunter. She was the host, so Diane Hunter, which now is Tiffany Hunter is the host. That's my sister. Don't hold it against me. But I'm the favorite child, in case anyone was wondering, and especially if Tiffany is watching. But then my first fiction book, which is what I really wanted to do, I am a novelist at heart, it was just, like Dani said, a dream come true, but it had taken me 7 years to really write that book. So, and after 6 years, I had submitted it, and they basically said, after months and months of waiting for an answer, said, you know what, we love the story, but we really want more depth of characters. So I spent an entire year just deepening those characters. And so it was a lot of learning process, both from the cookbook, learning the back end of the publishing world, before I was actually on the other side. And it was wonderful seeing both sides of it. So,
What about you, Sian?
I think if I had to use just one word, I would say it was a little surreal. I sort of fell into writing novels. It wasn't something that I had aspired to for years and years. I had written for a couple of magazines while I was in college, and my father was the one who was always encouraging me to write a book. And I would say, it's too big, it's too long, I can't do that. And then, as I mentioned before, when my youngest was napping, I just started to feel bad that my children didn't have the same connection to their Welsh heritage that I had, having grown up there. And so I decided to start a fictional story based on the village where my father had grown up and some of the experiences that our family had had, and that grew into a novel-sized story, which I then printed out and sent to my father and said, "Here's the book you've always asked me to write. Don't bother me again." And my sister-in-law was staying at my parents' house. My brother was interviewing for medical school back east, and she picked up the manuscript and read it and said, "You've got to send this in to someone." So I guess, have to credit my sister-in-law and my father with this journey. And then once it was accepted, they asked me to keep writing for them. And so I feel very fortunate.
Let's talk about the book that brings you here tonight. For you, Sian, that's A Time Traveler's Masquerade. What can you tell us about it?
Well, A Time Traveler's Masquerade is the first book in a new Time Slip series. And one of the signatures of my writing style, I've written in multiple genres, but this one I would put in fantasy/historical, probably more historical, romance, I guess. There's a romantic thread, there's a suspense thread. But what I like to do when I write one of these books is I like to find an event or a person that people don't know an awful lot about, and I use that as the backbone for my story, and then I write a fictional story around it. And so A Time Traveler's Masquerade is based on Guy Fawkes and the Gunpowder Plot that occurred in 1605. It follows the timeline and the events as closely as I possibly could. And the person who goes back in time has to help avert the Gunpowder Plot without completely changing history. And it is the first in a series, and the series name is McQuivey's Costume Shop because the time portal is a costume shop. So the people go into the costume shop, they put on a costume. When they come out of the changing room, they are transported to the era of the costume that they're wearing.
What about you, Traci? Novel Thread is the first in a new series?
Yeah, so Novel Thread's the first in a new series, and this will be mostly more like companion novels. So the main characters will still be there, but there'll be new main characters to join them. But this one was fun because it's probably the most autobiographical of everything, because the main character is a finance officer for the CIA, which is what I used to do. She was a complete closet writer and ends up having that, and that was true about me as well. And then she was, the CIA had cleared one of her manuscripts just so she could share it with a critique group, which of course she never did because she was afraid to. And the CIA is like, we need somebody to go undercover as a potential best-selling author with this new publishing house, or this very established publishing house that we think may have some ties to terrorism. And so it's a lot of fun because it's using, again, the knowledge of the publishing industry. And it was funny because when I was pitching this book originally, like I actually pitched it to some other publishers or some agents, and everyone was afraid to do anything because they were afraid of, like, if the publishing industry would be mad at me over this. And I was like, everyone who's read it is like, no, it's great. You know, like all of my former editors and everyone who's read it have been like, no, it's spot on. Like I was nice, but there's just, you know, I have a problem with bombs. So there's always has to be like a bomb or somebody getting killed or whatever. So I think I made a few pages before somebody died. But yeah, it's and then I also have like the main character's younger sister is you know, in the entertainment industry peripherally, and so that was what my sister is as well. And but of course there's a love interest who's also CIA. So it's just a lot of fun and a few humorous situations, but a lot of some truth in there too.
Dani, your book we have tonight is One Wrong Move, but you have a new book coming soon.
Yes. So One Wrong Move is the first in my latest series. And the whole series is called Jeopardy Falls, and it focuses on a family of siblings that grew up with con parents. They were con men, and the kids were pulled into these cons as kids, and they've grown up, they've turned their lives around, and so they want to kind of pay back what they did, and so they decide to start a private investigation firm. and they bust cons for a living and right injustices. And the second book in the series that John just mentioned is 2 Seconds Too Late, which will be out the end of the month. And it features Riley and Grayson, who are one of the siblings and one of the other PIs, and they have to go undercover at a fancy resort spa place when a woman goes missing.
Now, One Wrong Move is different from your other books in the sense of the setting. Is that it?
Yes, all my settings have been coastal settings. I love the beach, and I've always set mine near water. And I decided to set this in the Southwest. I lived in New Mexico for a number of years, and I love the area. Met my husband there, got married there, and so I set the private investigation firm is in Santa Fe, New Mexico. But this book and the one that will be coming out shortly both take place also in Arizona.
I think there's this misperception that, from reader's standpoint, that when you're writing fiction, you get to make everything up. But sometimes you have to ground things in reality. So what kind of research was involved in your latest book? And we'll start with you, Sian.
Oh, I had to do a lot of research. Because I grew up in the UK, I was more familiar with Guy Fawkes and the Gunpowder Plot than most Americans are. Every November 5th, we would celebrate it with Guy Fawkes Night. So I had a basic idea of what it was all about, but I didn't know any of the details. I didn't know how big the conspiracy was, the names of the people, the timeline, exactly how they were going to go about doing it. So I had to do a lot of research. I actually, I have one book in particular that I read twice so that I would solidify those facts in my head, and wrote a lot of notes. And as I said before, the biggest thing for me was I wanted people to finish the book feeling like they really had learned something real. And to do that, I had to get the facts right. And I've written in multiple centuries, but I'd never written in the early 17th century before. So I even had to research things like the clothing and the kind of food that they ate and what their homes were like. And this was the time when the Black Death was prevalent in London. And so I had to study the bubonic plague. And Traci just shakes her head. We write for the same publisher, and she thinks I'm completely bonkers for all the research I have to do. But I just really feel like it's important to get it right.
Traci, having been in the CIA, it was probably easier for you to put yourself back in that world, but did you have to brush up on new methods, new techniques, new things they do?
Not a whole lot, because, I mean, first of all, most of my friends, they won't tell me anything because they're like, well, it's classified. So, but because I live in the DC area, and I'm like, well, let's just put it this way. If Quantico's having target practice, I know about it. So that's how close I lived in the military base. So just hearing, like, I'm pretty familiar with methods, and the FBI Academy is very close to me. So it's not really that hard to know what's going on in that world, just because even if people are kind of code talking, I can kind of figure out what they're talking about. So my research is more, I would call inadvertent research. Like, Sian has a plan, and Dani does the same thing, but it's like, I'm like, let's go on a trip to the UK and Paris and see what we do. And so I ended up, because Sian and I had traveled together, and one of the places we went down through was the Catskills that we went. Cotswolds. I'm I'm saying it wrong. Catskills. That's weird.
I'm just
I'm like,
here.
see, this is why I don't research, and I have to be like, Sian, what was that again? So anyway,
Yeah,
and
I'm
I
her
have the
backup
pictures.
research.
Yes, there are, but I was like, I'm saying it wrong because that's in my next book in New York. No, but so the Cotswolds, we were going through, and I was like, we went through all these quaint little villages, and I was like, oh, this would be fun. So I was going through my photos. I was like, oh, you put a little fog in here. This would be a great place for somebody to die. So, of course, spoiler alert, like by page 3, somebody dies in the Cotswolds. Yeah, I said it right this time, right?
I'm very proud.
See, I need my backup. This is why we are all friends. But yeah, for me, research is either a Google search for like a little detail as I'm writing, or it's saying, hey, Sean, how would you research this? And then like 5 minutes later, she's like, oh, this is what the answer is. And so I love my friends.
Dani, what about you? Your new book involves security.
Yes, it does. So I had a lot of fun researching for the new book. Security was definitely interesting. I had to talk to a lot of relatives, several that work in security, and got a lot of information from them. But it's such a developing field and ever-changing, so it was hard to kind of keep up with it, but I hope I did it justice. Some of the really fun parts I enjoyed researching were firing a gun, learning how to fire a gun. I took a gun certification class just to be able to go and shoot one without hurting anybody. Outside of the
Very
book.
important.
In the book, yes. Outside, no. And went horseback riding, which I hadn't done in like 30 years, so that was a lot of fun. And I won't give the scene away, but I'll just say we played a lot at Uno.
Let's talk a little bit about the process of writing a book, because that can vary from author to author. We'll start with you, Dani, because I think I read somewhere that you compared your writing process to the Disney movie Tangled.
Yes, okay, you heard that. It's very true. So my husband and I are huge fans of Tangled, and they have the part where she comes out and says, best day ever. This is the worst day ever. I'm, never going back. I'm a horrible daughter. So my husband made me this picture of Tangled, but he replaced things with writing. Best author ever, worst author ever. I can't write anything. This is the best book ever. And he said that's basically the cycle I go through every time I write a book. I start out with like lots of enthusiasm. I don't really plot, so I start writing the first draft, and it's just kind of fun and all over the place. And then I read through it, and that's where I go, I'm a terrible author, because it doesn't make a lot of sense, and it's way too short, and I just have no idea where it's going. So I set it aside for a little bit, and then I go back through it, and I make it look like a book. And then I felt pretty proud. And then I read it again and think, no, this is horrible. And I'll try to go through it one more time before I send it to my publisher. But my editor, who's in the back, can attest to that I definitely do the Tangle method, the deadline panic, the just emotional writer, is, I guess, would describe me well.
Traci, what about you?
So my best friend when I'm drafting, believe it or not, is my treadmill. I write while I'm on my treadmill. I have a little it's a old Alpha Smart Neo. It's the old-fashioned word processor, and I put it up on the display, and I just type. And I know what I'm writing as soon as the words hit the screen. Like I have no idea what I'm going to do. So,
I hurt myself that way.
you don't go that fast. And I found that if you go over 4 miles an hour, the typos are just not worth it. So,
Sean?
Well, I think all three of us would probably put ourselves in the discovery writer or pantser category rather than plotters. I may be erring more on the plotter side than the other two ladies. Barely. I have to have a beginning and a middle and an end, but how I string those together, I don't actually know. And so that part of it is discovery. And I will tattle on Traci because we know each other very well. We have actually written a romantic suspense series together. We each have characters that we write their points of view. We tag team, and Traci told me when we started writing together that she also had a beginning, middle, and end, and it was completely untrue. Traci has nothing when she starts writing. And so,
I know this now.
Yes. So it was an awakening for her when I pointed that out. But we got literally 2/3 of the way through the book, and I finally said, I'm not writing anymore until we know who the bad guy is. And so
We were not to page 200. I'm in my defense. Like, that's my line. If 200, I need to know.
So anyway, that's why I'm going to say I'm maybe more of a plotter, even though I wouldn't claim to be a plotter. But Traci is quite unbelievably discovery.
Each of you has written a number of books. Many of them are series. When you're starting out, do you always know this is going to be a series, or does it sometimes just happen organically? And as a second part to that, what are the advantages to writing a series? Are there any disadvantages? I can think of one, but we'll start with you, Dani.
Okay, I'm very curious on the one. You'll have to tell me when we're done. So all of my books have started out as a series. Sometimes I don't know how many books necessarily in the series. My first series was contracted for 3 books, but there were 5 siblings. So I was really hoping to do a book for all of them, and I was able to do the 5-book series. So I know ahead of time that I'm going to have, 4 main characters or 5 friends or, 4 siblings, and I'll have that many books in the series. I love writing series because I get to spend more time with the characters. They start to feel like friends. When I wrote my first series and it was 5 books, it was over a number of years. And when I stopped, my family was like, we're going to miss the McKennas. Like, we're so used to you saying their names and, the jokes and just different things. So I think the advantage is that readers get to know your characters well, and they get to see the whole family dynamics and the setting for a longer time. And I really enjoy that. Disadvantage is if the momentum kind of goes away as you're writing the series and you start to think of new series when you're only halfway through and you kind of want to move on. I would say that that's a disadvantage.
So I'm kind of a unique author when it comes to my series. I can't even really tell you how many I've done, but most of mine intertwine even with each other. Like some of my series will intertwine with the others, but I also don't just do one series and then finish it and then start a new one. So like I had one that just finished beginning of this year, and it started in 2008, I think. So it was like 14 books. And a lot of times I'll just start with a book and I was like, oh, and I think that was the one where I realized that I do this all the time. I would start and it was like, it was a squad of Navy SEALs and there were 5 characters. And I was like, oh, I like all of these guys. They're all probably going to get a book. And what happened was at 5, when I was hitting book 5, it was actually around book 4, I started getting fan mail saying, please don't stop this series. Like, you're not finishing it, are you? And so I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll add a couple more people. Well, then they're like, well, you're not, as soon as I hit book 6 and they thought there were 7 characters, like, wait, you're not stopping now. And so 14 books, and I still am like, you're really going to stop the series? I'm like, guys, so the disadvantage I have is I don't remember everything about every character because I'm so disorganized because I'm such a discovery writer. And so I have a group on Facebook called Tracy's Friends, and they're my true friends because I'm like, does anyone remember if Jim Whitmore's secretary has a name? Or does anyone remember the name of this child? Or does somebody have a kid? Or, things like that. And so because I'm like, my readers have read my books more recently than I have because I'm working on the next one. So, but I agree with Dani. I love that we get to know the characters so well. And also, I'm horrible at naming characters, and so that's why all of mine intertwine. I needed a special ops unit. I'm going to use the one I already know, and they already have names and everything. So otherwise, I have a lot of little brackets that say name or secretary. Or I don't name my characters until the CIA has to clear my books. So
I've done both. I've written a lot of standalone books, and I have written a couple, I guess, 2 or 3 series. And I think in answer to your question, one of your questions, I have started a series knowing it was the start of the series, just like this McQuivey's Costume Shop. I've also done a series that I didn't intend to be a series. The Georgian Gentleman series was supposed to be standalone. The Noble Smuggler was the first book. And I can genuinely credit one of my readers. She wrote to me and she said, this has to be a series because in the Noble Smuggler, there is a best friend. And she said, we have to have his story. And it was really her encouragement that made me think, yeah, you're right. He does need a story. And it just sort of snowballed into 6 books. And I think that each of those books, because they're standalones and yet they're interconnected, I love that. I think the series that Tracy and I have done together, which is the Falcon Point series, we have the same characters that continue through. And I think, I don't know if this is the disadvantage that you're going to reference, but obviously the disadvantage when you have something like that is that it's hard not to start with book one. You know, if you pull book 3 and realize you're missing the beginning, then it's tricky. But when we're writing these series where each book is a standalone and you can read them in any order, then like Dani and Traci said, you just come to love the people and their connections and the cameos that you see from the other characters as they come into other books.
Actually, you did kind of guess it, Sean. I'm coming from a reader, bookseller, librarian perspective, and there are some readers even if you say the book stand alone, there are some people, no, I have to start at 1. And
Yes.
if you can't get book 1 for them, then
Well, yes, I mean, nobody
challenging.
wants to start Harry Potter on book 6,
Yeah.
right? You just don't want to do that. So, yeah.
I want to go back to something Traci said about the CIA still clearing your books.
Yeah, so part of my secrecy agreement when I started was that anything that would be published that had to do with intelligence has to be cleared by them for the rest of my life. So that was part of it. So while I'm in CIA, if you're publishing anything, I could be doing an article about making the best pumpkin soup. It would also have been cleared just to make sure I wasn't coding anything in it. But yeah, so everything's like I have the second book to the novel, the one that follows Novel Threat, is with them right now, which I'm hoping they'll send me tomorrow because it's due tomorrow. So, like, please, guys, could you know? And I'm asking for a favor. I was a week late getting it to them, so it may not happen. But yes, but they're really good. Some of the agencies and like the Pentagon and such, DoD, can take much longer, but the CIA has their publication classification review board. They usually get it back to me within 30 days. So I just build that into my schedule of my book is due April 1st, so it's really due on March 1st to the CIA. So
My next question for each of you is you have been writing for quite a while. You have experience as published authors. What would you tell yourself if you could go back to when you were first starting out as being, this is what you need to know about the business of writing? We'll start with you.
Oh, that's a good question. One, I would encourage myself that yes, it can take 7 years, but you will get published, which would take a lot of pressure off. I think what you need to know, it would honestly be about everything outside of the writing that happens in an author's life. So the social media, the newsletters, the reader email, which is actually the best part. Taking time people taking time to reach out is amazing, and so responding is great. The community with readers is wonderful. I have a group too, Dani's Suspense Squad, and they are super helpful with things. So usually I email my editor and go, do you remember the name 12 books ago about this person and this? But I don't keep good records either. So now I know I can ask them instead of my poor editor. So, but yes, I think it would be, there's so much more that goes on, putting in for cover titles, what I think a cover should look like, the editing process. You don't realize how in-depth the editing process is. And so your first editorial letter or your 10th or your 14th can be really hard sometimes. And so learning to just, take a deep breath and say, I'm going to deal with this in 2 days from now and after lots of Starbucks. But that's what I would kind of have told myself. Prepare for a lot more than you anticipate.
So I think the best advice I was given, and it was by the person who actually introduced me to my publisher, she said, edit, edit, edit. And I was like, okay. But in reality, it's like finding somebody who can give you really good feedback is invaluable, but also recognizing that the feedback, you have your voice, whatever you have originally, you have whatever somebody suggests, and often there's a third option that is the best option, but your editor is trying to make you the best author you can be. And so I think just recognizing that, first of all, like I was thinking, you kind of get this mentality of when you're first starting of, are you in competition with other people trying to get published? And the truth is, in the publishing world, it is very inclusive. Like, there are so many people who want to help everyone else out. It is it is amazing. It is an amazing group. It's not to say there aren't people who are more competitive, but in general, if I write an amazing book, Sean writes an amazing book, and Dani writes an amazing book, they're all going to get published because they're going to all find a home. So it's like, I think it's perseverance, but also really understanding the craft and taking the time to truly know that. That's how you're ultimately going to succeed.
It's really hard being last when you've both given all the good answers. That doesn't mean I want to be first, though. I just want to basically agree with both Dani and Traci. I think that I had no idea of how many extra things there would be. When you imagine being an author, you imagine just writing books. But as Dani said, there's so much marketing and there's so much social media and there's so many conferences. And to be honest, one of the biggest blessings of writing are the relationships that you make within the writing community, both authors, editors, readers, and that is something that I will always treasure. And I also agree with what Traci said. I think that I would say that most of the authors that I know, even though they're incredible authors, as Dani said with her tangled analogy, we all go through moments of imposter syndrome where we struggle with, can we really do this? Is our work really worth publishing? And I think that for me, one of the most important things I would tell myself is trust the people who are trying to make you the best that they can be. So I have a wonderful, incredible editor. I share the same one as Traci. And we've worked together long enough now that I trust her. And so if she comes back, and this just happened last week, she came back on a book that I thought we had already edited and said, well, we need to write an additional scene. And I didn't want to write an additional scene. That was like way down on my list of things I wanted to do. But I trust her enough to know she wants this book to be better. And if I write this additional scene, it will be better. And so you have to remain humble enough to do that and yet confident enough to think, I can.
All of your books fall under the umbrella of inspirational fiction. And I think for people who have not read in this genre, there's a misperception that it comes in one flavor. Can you talk a little bit about the different kinds of inspirational novels there are? And I'll throw it open to whoever wants to start.
All right, I'll go first on this one. So I mentioned that one of the biggest blessings of being an author are the people that we get to associate with. I would say that my number one thing that I'm most grateful for is when I receive a message or a letter from somebody who has read one of my books and says, thank you for writing this book. It helped me through, and then you fill in the blank. It helped me through the time that I had to sit next to my dying mother in the hospital. It helped me through the time that I lost my husband. It helped me escape the hard things in life. And I think if I was to classify inspirational fiction in one way, I would say we strive as authors to lift. We strive to do to give a portion of ourselves and put it in the book in such a way that you feel that when you come out from reading that, you are happier, you have some more peace. Even if it's only to escape reality for a short while, we want you to feel lifted.
And I think I've been asked many times like what my brand is, and I've used the term family-friendly fiction. But it's like last night we had an event and there was a young man, 10 years old, who reads my books with his mom. But I was like, you can put an audiobook in and be driving across the country, and grandma and the 10-year-old can be in the car, and there's not going to be any language. There's not going to be, any of the things that anyone's going to blush, about. And so I think a lot of times it helps bring families together. It's things that, some couples will be reading my books together and things like that. But, there's going to be some that have, kind of a Christian flavor and maybe would not fall in the same category as mine. So there's definitely some, just like in any fiction genre, you're going to have that. And I would consider myself more just a straight national suspense thriller author, but I just don't have some of the elements that lean darker. So it's going to have some of that light.
I really agree with Sean on this. See, if you go last, this is what happens. I see it now. So for me, I think what she said puts it together perfectly. The one reader email that still gets me, and this was years ago, but a lady wrote me and she said, I had lost my child and I was in such a depression, and somebody gave me your book, and it really helped me. You know, it didn't make the hurt go away, but it really helped me. And I thought, my husband said, that's who you're writing for. That's why you're writing. And I think whether it is just an escape from something, but something that can be uplifting, something that in my books, I always like to have hope as part of it. And so I think things that are uplifting, things that are hopeful, things that end happy, even if there's a lot of killing somewhere in the book, but they end on a happy note, positive note. I think that's really where I would put it.
And maybe I could even add to that. Traci and I were talking to some other authors not long ago, and we came to the realization that each of us has a quality that we instinctively or completely subconsciously put into our books, and we were trying to figure out what they were. And I decided that mine was kindness, and Traci's was courage and bravery, and loyalty, and Dani, it sounds like yours is hope. And so I think we try and take these traits that do bring light and just infuse them into our stories so that others can feel it.
That's fascinating. I think another author called it her core story, so she always comes back to that story in each of the books she does. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about each of you as readers, because before you were writers, you were readers. Did you read the kind of books that you wanted to write today, or were there other books that were important to you, other authors?
So I love the books that I write today. I loved reading them. So Agatha Christie was huge. Sue Grafton, huge fan of Sue Grafton. Quite a number of suspense authors. But I also love classics. I love Jane Austen is one of my favorite. All of hers, Charlotte Bronte. So I kind of read a wide spectrum. But I would definitely have to say, if I'm going to gravitate towards one, it would be mystery. If we could have a Jane Austen mystery, it would just be. I know, but I meant from her, written by her. But there are some, and I've heard they're fabulous. Really? Oh, okay. Now I know what I have to get when I leave here. So, all right.
So I was pretty eclectic in what I would read, but of all things, I actually wrote I used to read a lot of the YA romance, and it was sweet and clean, and I didn't have to really worry about the content. But I also I would read some that was some of the suspense and thriller, but I find I don't especially now, I'm more likely to read something that is historical or something that's not suspense, at least while I'm writing. If I'm writing, in between, I'm oh, let me grab Dani's book. But if it's in the middle of me drafting, I'm probably going to grab one of Sean's, because the likelihood of me writing about somebody in petticoats or whatever they do, I don't know what you do. It was
It's because you don't research. That's why you don't know what they do.
I don't. I'm not going to research the 1600s. So, yeah, but I used to love, just even some of the nonfiction, just anything that was interesting, and I would just grab. So I would read it, just about anything.
Yeah, and I'm very similar to Dani. I read a lot of the classics because I had a British education. We did a lot of, real classics, like Chaucer,
Not American classics.
Chaucer and Shakespeare and all of those kinds of things in school. And but at home, I loved suspense, and so I read a lot of Mary Stuart and Helen McGinnis. Those were, I think, my two favorites when I was growing up. And I actually credit Helen McGinnis for my love of writing a story around something historical. She wrote a book called While We Still Live, and it's set in Poland at the beginning of World War II. And I read that book. I was totally absorbed by the book. And when I finished it, I realized that I had learned more about the beginning of World War II in that fictional book than I had in my history classes. And I thought, wow, this is kind of magic. Now I use reading as my prize for finishing a manuscript. When I finish a manuscript, I'm allowed 3 books, and it's just like the best ever. And
It's
then
her candy.
It is. It's so great. It's the carrot at the end of writing a manuscript.
Helen McGinnis was amazing. She was one of the first women to crack the suspense field.
I know, and I literally have read all of her books. I really admired the way she wrote.
Before we turn to audience questions, if you'd like, can you tell us about what's coming next from you?
Okay, so the next one coming out is 2 Seconds Too Late. It'll be available the end of the month. And I am currently working on book 3 of the Jeopardy Falls series. And it's actually due the end of April. So I'm working very hard in between book tour stuff to finish book 3. But it is about one of the other siblings, Deckard, and a woman he met earlier on named Harper. And I'm really, really enjoying it. So I hope readers will too.
And so for me, so I have Royal Intrigue comes out June, and that's part of one of my Royal series. And then I have a novella collection called Shadows of Trust in June, August. What month is it? So that'd be August. And then in October, I'll have Victim Number 8, which is my second in my Luke Steele series that follows Hometown Vendetta. So that's the rest of this year.
And my Time Traveler's Masquerade actually releases tomorrow. And the second book in that series will come out in November, and that one is about Robin Hood. And then I am finishing up a manuscript right now, which I hope will be the beginning of a new series that is set in the late 1700s.
Do we have any questions for our authors? Now's your chance. Yep. Well, I do have one last question for Traci and Sian. In addition to fiction, you collaborated on a cookbook. What was that about?
Well, it was. It actually came about with a car ride. I was in the car with Traci and with another of our author friends called Sarah Eden, and we sometimes joke about the fact that our characters really like to eat. And between the 3 of us, we had a lot of published books, and they crossed a few centuries, and they all talked about the food that they were eating. And I just made this really offhand comment of, it would be kind of fun to write a cookbook with the recipes that our characters use in our books, and maybe we could have a quote from the book and the recipe, and to my amazement / horror, Traci and Sarah said, "That's a really good idea."
And I was the only one of the 3 of us who had ever written a cookbook, and so I just didn't tell them how hard it was. And afterwards, like, why didn't you tell us? I said, because it was such a great idea, we had to do it. So yeah. It was a lot of fun.
But it is a little bit unique in that it's not the type of cookbook that has a lot of illustrated pictures, but we did create or have recipes for all of these, and on one side of the page it has the quote from the book of what they're eating, and then it has the recipe on the next page, and our readers have really loved it. We had a lot of bake-offs and cook-offs, and it was a lot of fun, and it was so different from any other books that we've written.
Last chance. Any questions? Oh, we do have some questions. Go ahead.
Did you have any tips for authors just starting out trying to research something they have no grasp on, but just trying to balance wanting to make it realistic, especially when it comes to law and how law enforcement works and stuff, and wanting to make it realistic, but also not wanting to get so bogged down in that you can't move forward and write at all. How to balance, kind of, and
Just want to answer.
Well, I was going to say, when it comes to law enforcement, and such, most agencies and police departments have a public affairs office, and they also, like FBI. You go to FBI.gov, they will have like case files and things like that and procedurals. So there's a lot of great books out there that can give you some of those details. But one of the things that can kind of keep people from, and I know I do this because I don't like to research, is if I'm going through something, I will actually just put you could just put some type of a code key. Like, so for me, I do the squared off brackets. And I'll just say, research this. Or insert fight scene, make it believable. And then so like Sarah Eden, she hates kissing scenes, so she just puts kissy kissy inside of her little brackets. So, and they'll go back and deal with it later. But that, a lot of times that'll help it. Like I said, the public affairs officers, a lot of times you can just email them or and schedule an appointment to talk to somebody. And then you don't know what you don't know. And so sometimes you start developing your questions, and then you just, all right, I know I'm gonna have more questions. Who can I contact you again? And they end up being a wonderful resource.
I was going to say, for me, I actually love to research, but I will set a limit on myself that I give myself a month to research as much as I can. And then I write. And when I'm writing, I do what Traci does. And my code word is guinea pig. Agent told me that. He said, you're never going to have a guinea pig in your book, or purposely do not have a guinea pig in your book. And whenever you need to look up a code word, you just search guinea pig. It'll take you to all those places. And then once I get that draft done, I'll go through and all my guinea pigs and write down what I need to know, and then I'll go back and look them up. So that helps give you a start, but then you just kind of, focus on the writing itself, and then know you can put those details in later.
I'm totally putting guinea pigs in my book from now on. Brilliant.
It has to be a historical guinea pig, though.
Yeah. Well, it'll be wearing a petticoat.
I think we had another question way in the back. Question was, what made you want to be an author?
Okay, so I will tell you, I was working with some young ladies who wanted to read books that were a little bit more grown up, and they didn't want to have things that they wouldn't have, that mom and dad would object to. And so that's what made me decide to try to be an author, is I realized there wasn't a lot on the shelf that fit that bill. So I wanted to write for people like you who'd be able to read books with mom.
So I think reading a book that was a mystery that I loved by Agatha Christie when I was 8, and I'm guessing, how old are you? Wow. Yes, so I read a book I loved, and that started my love of mystery. And so then I read some books like Nancy Drew, and I had a favorite TV show, Scooby-Doo. I learned a lot from Scooby-Doo, and I knew I wanted to write mysteries as I was growing up, and so that was kind of my lifelong dream.
Which Agatha Christie was it?
Murder on the Orient Express.
I think I really decided that I wanted to be an author when I realized that this was a way that I could share things with my family. I could share things about where I grew up. I could share things about what I felt were important. I could share stories that, as I said before, would maybe help them and lift them when things got hard. And it is kind of neat to think that years from now, they will have that. They'll always have that because I've written it down.
And another question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, how do you manage, the actual writing? Do you have, a writing cave you go to? Do you have set yourself office hours? Do you only, write at night? What is the process for you? I know each author is different. I'm just trying to figure out what works where you get the magic.
So for me, I never was a morning person, but for some reason, if I wake up really early, like 5:30, and sit down and write first thing and don't look at anything else or check email or anything like that, and I write till lunchtime, that's when I do my best work. If I try to write after lunchtime, it will take me 10 times longer, and it won't be nearly as good. So for me, getting up early and getting it done before lunch and interruptions really helps me.
I would say, for me, I typically am the same as far as ideally the first thing I do in the day is start writing. And even if I only write a few sentences and then I have to go deal with other things, as long as I've started, then I probably can keep that creative side of my brain working. But I tend to, the logical side of my brain is more dominant. So if I balance my checkbook first, I am done. Like, it just kills my day. But I've also found, like, now I do write on the treadmill or my exercise bike, and I tend to get about 2 to 3 times more words that way than if I'm just trying to sit at a desk or, even in, wherever I am. But I will say it's changed. Like, when I first started, after my kids went to bed, I would write at night. Then I would do early morning before my kids got up. And then I had a new baby. And so when he went down for his nap, that was my time. And I would close the garage door. I would lock the front door. But my kids knew that if they have an emergency, call twice. I'm not answering the phone. So if it rings twice right after another, I will answer because I know it's something important. But I just completely said, this is my time. I'm not going to give it to anybody else. So I think it was just prioritizing and figuring out what works for you individually and know it's going to change through your life.
Yeah, I think that flexibility is important. And as you said yourself, I don't think that there is a one-size-fits-all. There is no, I don't think you could find 2 authors that do it exactly the same. In fact, as Dani and Traci were talking, I realized how different my system is, because I can't write if my house is messy. So the first thing I do is I have to make the bed, I have to do the dishes. And so I actually do my housework first and then I write. And so, like I said, there is no right or wrong, and it does change. As I mentioned before, I used to do it when my babies were napping. Now my baby is long gone from home, and so I have a lot more flexibility. And I will also say that it kind of depends on where you are in the writing process as to how much writing you do. For me, I guess I can't speak for everyone, but for me, the beginning of a manuscript is much slower. You're trying to find your way, you're trying to find the story, you're trying to get to know the characters. And so I tend to not be as productive at the beginning. At the end, when you're coming up to the climax and everything is going fast, then you're more productive. And when you have a deadline, you're super productive. And so the amount of hours that I spend will sometimes vary according to where I am in the process.
Another question?
Do you ever have things come to you in the middle of the night?
Oh, all the time.
Or in the afternoon when you're driving the car, you get some good idea?
You will find that almost every author probably has a notepad and pen or a voice app to record on their phone or some way of taking down an idea at any given time. Like, we all do it.
Yeah, at night I keep a notebook by the bed, and I'll wake up and think this is brilliant, and I'll write it all down. I'll get up in the morning and look at it and go, that was not brilliant. I don't even know what I was writing.
But it's going to be brilliant one of these days. So
There
Yeah.
you go. But I do the voice app. If I'm driving, I'll do a voice app and speak out what I want to make sure I remember.
And I have actually written things down in bed and then in the morning got up. And not only is it not necessarily a brilliant idea, but I literally can't read the writing.
So I have my keyboard next to my bed for that exact reason. I'm like, I can't read it if I try to write it out.
But yeah, I would say in bed and in the shower and in the car are probably the 3 top places that the ideas come, because it's where you don't have a distraction and your mind can really go. Yeah.
We had a question in the back.
So I know, again, every author does this different. Some people outline everything and know exactly what's going to happen in each scene, and others just sort of have an idea and then just start. So I want to ask a question to any of you who have an idea and then just start, and you don't have everything mapped out. What happens? I mean, do you ever get to a point where you're like, I don't know what's going to happen next, or I don't know how to get to, I have A and C, but I don't know what B is going to be, and then how do you work through that if you don't have that, like, detailed outline?
Yeah, I don't do a detailed outline, so it's exactly what you're saying. Sometimes I'll have ideas, like how to get from this point to this point, I don't know. So I take a lot of detours in my books. I try really hard to go all the way through the first draft. I used to always get caught up on page 100 because I didn't know what was happening after page 100. So I would just keep rewriting the first 100 pages, and I finally got where I'll write the whole first draft no matter how nonsensical or whatever direction it goes, and then I'll sit down and read through it, and I'll start to see what parts can stay. And then I'll figure out from that point on, okay, this can get to this if I do this. So it's kind of that second read through, second draft. And I do throw out a lot of words, which is always really hard. You know, you throw out 30,000 words, it's like heartbreaking. But I have to get it out to figure it out. So it's not the most efficient way to write, but that's how it works for me.
Yeah, and for me, I one of the things is to give yourself permission to write out of order. So like if I'm stuck on something and I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to get from point A to point B, but I kind of know what point B might be, and this is huge for me because I have no clue what's going to happen.
Or who the bad guy is. So I will go ahead and just jump. I'm like, let me just go ahead and get there. And I'm thinking it may be 3 scenes to get there, and it was actually 3 paragraphs. And the reason I was stuck is because I was getting bored with all of these details I thought I had to put in, and it wasn't necessary. So a lot of times I would just skip forward. But like, unlike Dani, for me to throw out words, I would say I maybe throw out between 500 and 1,500 words in a manuscript. Like I almost never throw out words. So but that's because I'm skipping forward and then going back and backfilling. And so again, everybody's different. Yeah, I don't throw away very many words either, just because they're
the
so
time.
hard to come by. I think maybe I know I write more slowly than Traci, and I don't know about Dani, but I try to get it right as I'm going, and I have to give myself grace for, okay, I only have this many words today, but they're solid words and I'm not going to have to cut them. And so I'm usually feeling my way as I go. And a lot of it, to be honest, is an internal feeling. It's following, you can say following your gut, following the spirit, however you want to say it. But the more you write, the better idea you have of what will work and what needs to be in there for it to work. It's really hard to explain that kind of mentality to someone who hasn't. I see these ladies nodding and everyone else is looking at me like, I don't know what you're talking about. But so it's hard to explain, but it is a feeling that you get as you write that the story is going the right direction, and you also get the opposite feeling. The story is not going the right way. And then I have to back up and look at it and say, okay, where did I take the wrong turn?
Well, and the interesting thing is, because I know all these authors. So Dani, you're a three draft writer. Sian is really a 1 draft writer, and I'm a 2 draft writer. So like I'm gonna probably like, and I know we have a friend who's what's Esther, like a 7 or 8 draft writer?
Oh yeah,
Like-
she's pushing on 10.
Like you know, there are some people that it's just how much detail are you going to put in at the beginning and then flesh out. But it's like I'm going to just get that core story down, and then I just have to flesh it out on that next draft. Sometimes I'm going to need a 3rd, depending on how rough the story was. But Sian, I've seen hers. I'm like, I've co-authored with her, and it's like, oh my gosh, it looks like it's ready to be published as she wrote it. And mine's like, I'm like, it's me. You have to be forgiving because it's going to be trash. So
I should just add here, I was just told to add a scene, so they're not always perfect.
but it was 1 draft. She just had to add extra to the draft.
One more question.
What current authors, not in your genre, do you follow to get maybe ideas? The one I'm thinking about is Amar Tolls. Do you read any of his books?
I haven't. No.
Oh, yes, Gentleman from Moscow.
Vocabulary and description.
Yes, that book is in my to-be-read pile, actually. When I finished my deadline, my agent recommended it to me and said it was fabulous.
The way he writes is just so, I mean, you know exactly, you can just picture.
Yeah, I've heard of it, but I haven't read it either. Yeah.
Now we all know what to go home and read.
And one of the advantages of being an author is with a traditional publisher is a lot of times we are able to cross promote with other authors within our publishing houses, and even sometimes across publishing houses. Like Dani and I have given each other books before, but a lot of times we'll have like advanced reader copies. And so it's not uncommon for us to be reading a wide breadth of authors and their books that haven't come out yet. And so we're very fortunate that we get to go everything from the classics all the way up to tomorrow's bestsellers at any given time. So
I think that's probably a good time for us to say thank you to Dani, Traci, and Sian for being here. And thank you, virtual audience, for turning into another author event at the Poison Pen Bookstore. Thank you,
Thank you
ladies.
so much.
We're going to go ahead and get our authors set up at the table here. I'm sure they love to sign books for you. Give us just a minute.